What are cryptocurrencies?
What are NFTs?
Time to buy Bitcoin. Buy and hold. Time to sell to whales.
Decentralized finance, smart contract, white paper.
Well, then buy it. Well, then sell it. I don't know.
Blockchain is revolutionary. What started as a decentralized peer-to-peer payment system has now become a word computer, with thousands of applications disrupting almost every field. One challenge remains, making it scale to onboard the next billion users. Luckily, Ethereum has an answer to that, and this is exactly what we'll be discussing today. This month of July, Eth CC, Europe's largest Ethereum event, will take place in Paris, to which Ledger is a proud sponsor. It will feature prominent speakers and entrepreneurs dedicated to the protocol. So we thought that this would be the perfect moment to dive into Ethereum and explore its future. From Paris, this is your host, Moel Sayed, and you're listening to On the Ledger. Today, I'm very happy to welcome two active members of the Ethereum community. First, we have Vlad Zamfir. Vlad is a leading researcher at the Ethereum Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to supporting the Ethereum ecosystem. Vocal on crypto Twitter, he frequently discusses blockchain governance, crypto economics, and other blockchain scalability proposals. Vlad is also a prominent contributor to the development of Ethereum scalability and its transition to proof of stake. We'll be joined by Jérôme de Tichey. Jérôme is the global head of client success at Ledger. He's also a blockchain and crypto professor and the president of Ethereum France, an organization that has the aim to raise awareness, to accelerate the adoption of Ethereum and blockchain in general. Without further ado, On the Ledger, Episode 5, The Future of Ethereum. Here we go! Vlad, Jérôme, welcome to On the Ledger. It's a pleasure to have you both here today. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Who goes first if we're not supposed to interrupt each other? Hey guys, I'm Vlad. I'm going first so we don't interrupt each other. I'm great. I'm, chilling like a villain, working, trying to change the world. You know how I roll.
Great.
Yeah, I'm Jérôme, the interjector. I sometimes stop Vlad when he's talking, and I'm doing great. Super glad to be here with you folks. Super glad to get to chat with Mo and also a little bit with Vlad if I get to interrupt him.
We'll make sure you get to do so. So let me try to set the stage for the conversation. I think we all agree that Ethereum revolutionized the blockchain space by becoming a word computer and creating the so-called application layer, giving birth to dApps, DeFi, NFTs, and numerous other innovations. However, at its current state, the protocol faces one big challenge: scalability. So here comes what we call the not-so-stupid questions. Vlad, in your opinion, how could Ethereum scale?
Well, there is like a very good kind of, at this point, very classic answer, which is sharding. So sharding is this idea that rather than having everyone have the same state and check all the same blocks, different subsets of the nodes could be concerned with different pieces of the state, different blocks, different shards, so to speak, of Ethereum. So the idea is if we split Ethereum up into different shards and we don't have everyone processing every shard, then we can kind of split up work and do it in parallel. And that results in scalability, in this deep sense. There are other approaches, but I'm a big scalability advocate and scalability fan. And I focus just on sharding. Sorry, I meant sharding. I said scalability there.
Okay, basically. So if I understand this correctly, it's if you have a big highway and then it's having, shortcuts to this highway that enable you to making it flow better. Is that correct?
I've never heard that before. Maybe imagine instead of having one highway, we had four highways.
Okay.
In parallel.
Okay.
Okay, if I may, Vlad, let me know if you like this image or not. So let's say you have a hairbrush, a round hairbrush. So you have the wooden part in the middle, and you have all the brushes that are in line. Sharding is having a central coordinator, the brush itself, the wooden part, and having the air communicating with the central part with each other. And every time you have a new block, you extend the size of the hairbrush. Does that looks right?
So that's like a particular model of sharding that has this like hub and spoke or like, beacon chain type of model.
Yeah.
But not all sharding necessarily has that model, although it is kind of like, the first generation of sharding solutions have this approach, basically because this is like the easy thing to do. Although I personally think that like we're going to see a future where we no longer have like a single, hub, so to speak.
Yeah.
But that's, somewhat like relatively less primitive technology that like we don't really see today just yet.
I think we've also heard of the transition to proof of stake. Jérôme, what is proof of stake and how does it compare to proof of work?
All right. Hey, what is proof of stake? What is proof of work? So both of those notions are from networking, the networking aspect of it. So we have a problem when we run a big network of nodes that are interconnected and communicated with each others. Is when we are in the blockchain context and we want to create a new block, we have to figure out which of the nodes is going to create this new block. So proof of stake and proof of work are two ways of selecting which nodes, which peer is going to create this new block. So in the context of proof of work, what you do is you create this giant lottery and you say to all the participants that they can exercise their power, their computing power on being better or worse at this lottery. So the bigger computer you have, the more chances you have of being drawn as the next person to do the block. And on the proof of stake side, we also have this lottery, but instead of picking people with expectations of being picked up as their computing power, you pick them up with the amount of capital they have locked up, or the amount of capital they have put at stake. So that's how I would differentiate the two. One is consuming a lot of power to run because it's a competition on the computing, so you have to feed electricity into that, and the other is locking up usually it's locking up the native unit of account of a specific network. So we mentioned the beacon chain before. It's the proof of stake currently running on Ethereum. And in order to participate to the proof of stake on Ethereum, on the beacon chain, you have to log 32 Ether, for example.
Okay, that's pretty clear. So talking about proof of stake, I think the way you've explained it, Jérôme, is that Ethereum or the ETH becomes the main resource to run the network. What's your take on the risk of centralization? In other words, exchanges or centralized entities holding and staking the majority of coins. Does self-custody start becoming crucial to the security of the network?
Can I answer?
Go on, Vlad.
So I actually personally think that there's a lot we can do that isn't really being considered today to fight this kind of centralization. Basically, in my opinion, we have a lot of room in crypto law to make it unlawful for exchanges to stake user funds. And I think that we can create basically norms, information, legal, like basically like a legal matrix that's associated with proof of stake protocol that makes it unlawful for exchanges to engage in this activity. And I think that really is like where we should go. And I think that like that there's kind of like a kind of a reticence or or kind of like an understanding of crypto that it's sort of like economic free for all, where like just the tech defines like the economy, and then like you can kind of do whatever. But really, we have this crypto law already that like strictly defines like how we have disputes about the protocol. And in my opinion, like that could be and should be adapted in proof of stake in order to, for example, ensure that no one is staking user currency without like locking the user up in like and giving them the same risk as like a validator has. The idea of turning proof of stake into a financial product is something that I'm super afraid of. And whenever people talk about interest rates, APY, like anything like that with respect to proof of stake, it gives me a lot of caution because like finance is highly regulated, and actually like the way in which we need like staking to work for like the security of the network, is actually undermined by treating it as a financial product and offering it as a financial service. And so actually I think that like we can, with associating the right information with the protocol, we can actually make it unlawful for the exchanges to provide these services, which would basically mean that like, if you as a user find out they've been staking your coins without, your consent, or like there's certain obviously like there are like limits also. You can't really stop like all service providers for staking, but however, we can recognize that these are essential infrastructure as opposed to commercial financial products. And to make it basically to recognize that actually offering staking as a commercial financial product is basically unlawful because it undermines the security of the system. And so I think it's very possible for us to be extremely hostile to these business models. And I think we should do that. And that's like, I think, a controversial opinion that's like far from the norm today.
Well, that's a very, very strong point you're making here. Maybe taking a little bit the voice of Ledger in this fight. Not your keys, not your coin. So when you deposit coins on an exchange, and Ledger has some exchanges as client though, but when you deposit the coin on the exchange, you are basically giving away your rights on the coins if the exchange has a problem. Like if the exchange lost the private key and doesn't have any insurance, or any backup system or whatever, like you bear the risk of risking your coin. Whenever the proof of stake that Ethereum developed went live, I was completely expecting exchanges to start offering their users, hey, you want to stake? I'm going to take a cut, or I'm not even going to take a cut, because if you stake, your funds are locked. They are locked on my keys until the funds are able to move, which we don't know exactly when it's going to happen. So it was super tempting for exchanges to do that. Even if from the design perspective of the deposit contract, of how you interact with the Ethereum 2 network when you want to stake, it seemed clear to me that the foundation did a good job on preventing to the max anyone from delegating. You basically have to trust the person doing the validation for you if you want to delegate your staking to someone else. So I think it's a matter of coming back to what we call decentralization in this context, or what we call security in this context. You need to. Some blockchains are taking a stance on saying, 21 nodes is enough for decentralization, and some of the blockchains are saying like, hey, everyone should be able to stake if they have a reasonable amount of capital to lock up, and a reasonable technical knowledge to run a node, and a reasonable setup in terms of hardware to run the node. But that's super hard to get to.
That's pretty interesting. So let me try to move onto another interesting subject. Everyone has been talking about EIP 1559. Some say that it will transform Ethereum into a form of ultrasound money that could potentially compete with Bitcoin. What do you think about that, Vlad? And why do you think people are actually, advocating for this ultrasound money narrative?
And one remark before you start, Vlad, when I was mentioning the difficulty bomb, whenever someone will tell you like EIP 1559 will never happen, the way the Ethereum upgrades are packaged is that everything comes in one go. So like postponing the difficulty bomb is also going to happen at the same time of the EIP 1559. So it's going to be super hard, and tell me if I'm wrong on that, Vlad, but it's going to be super hard for people to say like, hey, well, I don't agree with 1559, but I agree with the difficulty bomb diffuse. So I'm going to cherry pick on that. So it's very likely that if people are tired of the long block time and the difficulty bomb effects, they will indeed all chime into the EIP 1559 in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely bundling changes is like encouraged by the bomb and by like just the logistics of hard forking in general. And I think, but I don't think that makes it impossible to kind of like reject EIP 1559. But I will say this, the will to reject EIP 1559 seems to be kind of like only coming from miners. And so, it is kind of like a political situation where like it doesn't seem, but I'm not sure, but it doesn't seem like the coalition against EIP 1559 is very strong today. But I wouldn't want to call it. I wouldn't want to decide that. I encourage people to form coalitions and to discover each other and to see what their interests are. However, I will also say, I'm a big fan of 1559, although I really, really, really don't like the ultrasound money thing. And so I'm in like this weird camp where like I feel very bad that it's being abused in this way to try to make Ethereum seem like a deflationary currency, to try to get people to like buy in, to just manipulate people into thinking that like, this is going to be the future of money because it's like better than Bitcoin in terms of deflation. I mean, to me, that's like a gimmick and a sellout and like like not really a real honest thing. To me, it's like just hype. But I think there's really good fundamental reasons why 1559 is great, and that have nothing to do with the deflation or like the burn or like the macroeconomics of it, but they just have to do with the microeconomics of the fee market. And like in the microeconomics of the fee market, like this, seems like a dramatic improvement. And I want to stress that there's like a microeconomics here that I think is like really like this like kind of is like superseding and is like the reason why like ETH 1555 is a really good idea, even though like the macroeconomics, even though like it's not super clear what the macroeconomics like are going to be, like people are abusing and trying to be like, this is going to push the price of ETH up, and for me like that's kind of like hype, that's kind of like FUD. It's kind of like it's basically like and it's also buying into this very Bitcoin-like narrative, which I think is a tactical error because like Ethereum is not Bitcoin. Ethereum is very much differentiated from Bitcoin in its culture, its purpose, its ethos, its spirit. It's, the fact of trying to like become like, compete with toxic Bitcoin maximalism, is just like such a tactical error that I want to also flag that.
So now that we spoke of the past and the present, we're going to explore the future. It's time for the ledger forecast. Jérôme, how would you define crypto economics? And in your opinion, what will the world economy look like 10 years from now with the development of all this technology?
So from a researcher perspective, from a professor perspective, I'm from an economist background. So I look at crypto economics as a new field of research, a new field of designing systems where the property right is enforced inside the system with certainties. Like being able to say, this token, I let you move my token for this and for that. The smart contract aspect of it, or the design protocol aspect of it, makes it super interesting, opening up many new ways of automating things and constructing new places for users to interact with each other. And we are only at the beginning of the exploration of this new field. And as the world gets more and more interconnected, more and more lean in terms of interactions, this is going to help out a lot, I think, in our daily lives. Now, what will the world look like in 10 years? I hope I'll have a proper way to store a private key in my phone. That would be a big plus.
That's great. So let's listen to something and maybe have your take on it.
The reason why people are so interested in cryptocurrencies these days is just because they're making money off of them. Yeah. So the fundamental application right now seems to be just money. And Bitcoin seems to be willing to, the protocol is in service of the currency. And here it seems almost the opposite. Is that fair to say?
The currency is in the service of the protocol. Yeah, definitely. I definitely say that is our philosophy.
So, of course, this was Vitalik on TechCrunch in 2017. And it actually links back to the conversation that we were having earlier in between the differences in between Ethereum and Bitcoin. Vlad, how do you think Ethereum will impact economics and finance compared to Bitcoin?
Well, Ethereum has a much wider mandate than Bitcoin. It has it's mandated sort of to like apply blockchain and like public blockchains to kind of everything like markets, finance, and also way outside that. And so I think like Ethereum like stands to have a bigger impact, basically because like, it's what's possible for Ethereum to do conceptually is much bigger. And because, Ethereum as a culture has, or as like a, let's say, as like a scene has like supports a lot of different subgroups and like sub communities and like people who have very different views about like what we should do, and so like the room for maneuver, the room for us to adapt and change is a lot bigger. I mean, Bitcoin has kind of like painted themselves in this corner where they can't really do much other than like try to be like the future of money in like this very like boring e-gold kind of tradition. And so Ethereum has like a much wider narrative and mandate and much more room to maneuver because of its like institutional definition. And so like Ethereum, in some way like sky's the limit, but also on the other hand, the worst case failure modes for Ethereum are much worse than Bitcoin. And so like, Ethereum like has like, a lot more potential like both transformative, revolutionary, but also potential to, unleash like autonomous robot hordes that like aren't something we want to see in like the way we organize society. And so I think like Ethereum is like a much bigger Pandora's box that like it takes much more like, to organize around, to organize with, to like keep, healthy and like useful for people. And so I think like Ethereum, by virtue of its like complexity and expansive mandate and, you can kind of almost like project it onto Ethereum, like whatever your fantasies are for blockchain.
That's pretty interesting.
And so I think like that means that like it has way more future, but it also makes me scared, because like the things it could go much more badly than Bitcoin can.
Yeah, but the worst case scenario is also what could happen to Ethereum. Everything falls down. Everything Ether goes to the ground. But in the end, we still have 1.2% of the Bitcoin network, the Bitcoin unit of accounts that are living on Ethereum. So we won't be that bad. We have lots of wrapped Bitcoin living in the network at the moment.
But the worst case outcomes that I'm thinking about are like much worse than that. And they're more to do with like the way that like society responds, assuming that like, for example, Ethereum falls out of like, the public graces and becomes like a real public hazard or a public enemy, in which case like the kind of international coordination that would be required to like, crack down on Ethereum could be like in the end much worse than like just Ethereum, like, like failing, right? Like if Ethereum leads to like a global crackdown on like civil liberties, like that's a big failure that like isn't, like possible to like, size up in terms of the price of ETH.
So it's time to move on to our last segment of the show. This is the tip for crypto first grader. So let me throw out a softball that any of you can catch. What tips would you give to someone who's just stepping into the world of Ethereum? Maybe the biggest mistake to avoid, or maybe you could tell us about one you made.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the most important thing that people need to do whenever they get into cryptocurrency is like understand really like asymmetric key cryptography and like the nature of private keys and like the backups and like really be sure that they don't lose access to their keys. Like that's like the number one bad experience people have is like just lost life-changing like life, like fortunes, like and so like the number one thing you can do is like keep your 12 words safe, like like use hardware wallets. That's like the number one thing. And then another thing is it's not private. Like don't think what you're doing on Ethereum is private. It's extremely public. Like you don't have privacy on Ethereum. Like okay, we have Tornado Cash, but as a rule of thumb, there is no privacy on Ethereum. And so like if you remember those two things, you're going to do relatively well.
Jérôme, what's your take on that?
So I think the don't follow the hype unless it's Ethereum. That's one thing. Don't follow blatant influencers. Like I think it leads to many FOMOs and bad situation where people invest massively in some protocols. Like I'm a big fan of Dogecoin as a meme, as a joke. But like don't forget that behind those blockchains, behind the fancy people advertising them or making lots of noise about how great it is, about how McDonald's is going to use this blockchain for that, and so on. Don't forget that behind those doors there are researchers like Vlad that dedicate their life on improving a certain type of consensus algorithm. It's important to look at it as a technology rather than as a social movement that's suddenly going to burst into billions of dollars in your wallet. But of course, stay safe with your coins. Stay safe with your ledger and your backups. And one thing I would advise people to avoid is to forget that those pieces of technology are built by builders.
That's a great way to end it, gentlemen. Thanks a lot, Vlad. Thanks a lot, Jérôme. Great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry for going over, but maybe you guys will cut it and make it all work in 30 minutes. But if not, like 45 minutes, hey, not so bad.
Yeah, great discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining, Vlad, and thanks for the invitation, Mo.
That was Vlad Zamfir and Jérôme de Tichey, both precious contributors to the Ethereum world. A truly enriching conversation. I hope you were able to learn more about Ethereum and most of all, about the great promises this technology holds for the future. If you want to dive deeper, you can read Ledger Academy, World School of Block, and feel free to subscribe to this podcast, because there is more to come. This podcast was brought to you by Ledger, directed and edited by Theo Isman. This was On the Ledger from Paris. Take care. Au revoir. This content is provided for informational purposes only and is the sole expression of our opinion and should not be relied upon as legal, business, investment, tax advice, or more generally any type of advice. Ledger will not be responsible for the consequences of reliance upon any opinion or statement contained in this podcast or any omission. Crypto assets are volatile. You should be fully aware of the level of risk involved before engaging in any crypto-related activities, and you should consult your own advisors as to those matters. References to any securities or digital assets are for illustrative purposes only and do not constitute an investment recommendation or offer to provide investment advisory services. Please note that any loss of data, crypto assets, or profit is your sole responsibility.